Glamour and Reflections. Chapter 1. Office Talk. Sophie sat quietly in her office, surrounded by neat stacks of paper and a soft hum from her computer. The morning light came through the tall windows, casting a warm glow on the polished desk. Her office was simple but elegant, with a few framed certificates on the wall and a small plant in the corner. She liked order. She liked silence. It helped her think clearly and stay focused. She had worked hard to become a respected lawyer in one of Chicago's top firms. Her days were filled with contracts, meetings, and long hours of research. But she didn't mind. She enjoyed her work and took pride in doing it well. Sophie was not the loudest person in the room, but her calm presence and sharp mind made people listen when she spoke. Just as she reached for her coffee mug, the door opened. Kate walked in with her usual energy, her heels clicking against the floor. She held a cream-colored card in one hand and waved it dramatically. The envelope had a shiny corporate logo printed on it. Kate's style was bold and modern. Her office, just down the hall, was full of fashion magazines, colorful folders, and a coffee machine that everyone said made the best brew in the building. Kate was Sophie's closest colleague and friend. They had started at the firm around the same time, but their personalities were very different. Kate was confident, outspoken, and always dressed to impress. She loved parties, attention, and anything glamorous. Sophie, on the other hand, preferred quiet dinners, books, and long walks by the lake. Kate dropped the card on Sophie's desk and rolled her eyes. She said the invitation was unnecessary and called it a waste of paper. She pointed out that Nick, the man behind the event, often flew in private jets while claiming to care about the environment. Sophie smiled and turned on her coffee machine. She had heard this argument before. Nick was their former client and now the CEO of a major tech company. He was known for his charm, his money, and his ability to make headlines. He had worked with their firm on several big cases before moving to New York. Sophie remembered those days well. Nick had always been polite and professional, but there was something more beneath the surface. Something personal. Kate reminded Sophie that Nick had been in love with her. Sophie didn't deny it. She admitted that he had even proposed once, but she had said no. It hadn't been easy. Nick was attractive, successful, and kind in his own way. But Sophie had felt that their lives were too different. She wanted something simple and real. Nick lived in a world of luxury and attention. After the rejection, Nick had left for New York. He stayed there for almost 2 years, building his company and staying out of the spotlight. Now, he was back in Chicago, and the invitation was for a grand welcome party. Sophie looked at the card again. The event was being held in one of the city's most elegant venues. It promised music, champagne, and a guest list full of important names. Sophie wasn't sure if she wanted to go. She didn't enjoy big crowds or fancy events. But something about the invitation made her pause. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was unfinished feelings. She didn't know yet. Kate, of course, was already planning her outfit and talking about who might be there. As the coffee machine finished brewing, Sophie handed Kate a cup. They sat together for a moment, sipping quietly. Outside, the city moved fast, but inside the office, time slowed down. Sophie thought about Nick, about the past, and about what the evening might bring. She didn't expect anything dramatic. But deep down, she knew that some stories don't end with a simple no. Sometimes, they wait for a second chapter. Chapter 2. Old Feelings. Sophie sat at her desk, pretending to read a contract, but her mind was far away. The words on the page blurred together. She wasn't thinking about work. She was thinking about Nick. The invitation to his welcome party had brought back memories she had tried to forget. It wasn't just about the event. It was about everything that had happened before he left for New York. There was one conversation she had never shared with Kate. It had happened a few days before Nick's departure. Sophie had tried to do something kind. She thought maybe Nick and Kate could be a good match. Kate was beautiful, smart, and full of life. She had a way of lighting up a room. Sophie believed they could be happy together. So she had suggested the idea to Nick, hoping it would help him move on. But Nick had surprised her. He didn't laugh or thank her. Instead, he looked at her with a serious face and said he had to be careful. He talked about his position, his money, and how people often wanted something from him. He said he couldn't risk being with someone who didn't understand his world. Then he said something that stayed with Sophie. He told her that she was on his level, but Kate wasn't. Sophie had felt a mix of emotions. She was shocked, then angry. She didn't like the way he spoke about Kate. It felt unfair and cold. Kate was more than stylish clothes and quick jokes. She was loyal, smart, and worked harder than anyone Sophie knew. But before Sophie could say anything, Nick had changed the subject. He acted like his words didn't matter. But they did. They stayed in Sophie's mind long after he left. Now, with the party coming, Sophie didn't know what to expect. She wasn't sure if Nick had changed. Maybe he had grown. Maybe he hadn't. She didn't want to admit it, but part of her still cared. Not in the way she used to, but enough to wonder. Enough to feel nervous. While Sophie was lost in thought, Kate walked into her office again. She looked distracted. Her usual energy was missing. She held a letter in her hand. It was from Robert, her ex-boyfriend. He lived in Wisconsin and worked as a farmer. They had met during a weekend trip and had dated for a few months. Robert was kind and strong, but his life was simple and quiet. Kate had ended things because she couldn't imagine herself living on a farm, far from the city, far from her career. Sophie watched as Kate read the letter again. Her face was soft, almost sad. Sophie reminded her gently that she had made the right choice. Kate loved the city. She loved her job, her friends, her fast-paced life. Living in the countryside, far from everything she knew, would have made her unhappy. Sophie told her to throw the letter away. It was better not to look back. Kate nodded, but didn't move. Sophie understood. Letting go was never easy. Even when the decision made sense, the heart still held on. Sophie knew that feeling well. She had said no to Nick, but the memory of him still lived in her. Not because she wanted him back, but because some people leave a mark that doesn't fade quickly. That afternoon, the office was quiet. The usual noise of phones and footsteps seemed distant. Sophie and Kate sat in their separate rooms, each thinking about the past. About choices made and paths not taken. They were strong women, but even strong people have moments of doubt. Sophie looked out the window at the busy street below. Cars moved fast, people walked with purpose, and the city kept going. Life didn't stop for old feelings. It moved forward. And maybe it was time for her to do the same. The party might not change anything, but it could offer a kind of closure. Or maybe it would open a new door. She didn't know yet. But she was ready to find out. Chapter 3. Getting Ready. The evening of the party arrived quickly. Sophie stood in front of her mirror, brushing out her blonde hair. She usually wore it in a neat bun for work, but tonight she let it fall over her shoulders. It made her look softer, less formal. She wanted to feel relaxed, even though her thoughts were far from calm. The invitation had stirred something inside her, and she wasn't sure what it meant yet. Her dress was simple but elegant, dark blue silk that hugged her figure without being too bold. She chose silver earrings and a small clutch. Sophie didn't like to draw attention, but she understood the importance of presentation. In her line of work, people noticed everything. Tonight, she wanted to look confident, even if she didn't feel that way. Kate arrived at her apartment full of energy. She wore a black dress with glittery heels that sparkled with every step. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair was styled in soft waves. Kate loved events like this. She enjoyed the glamour, the lights, the chance to meet interesting people. She had a way of turning heads without trying too hard. Sophie looked at her friend and smiled. They were so different, yet they balanced each other well. Kate was bold, Sophie was quiet. Kate spoke quickly, Sophie listened carefully. Together, they made a strong team, both in the office and outside of it. They took a taxi to the venue, which was located in the heart of downtown Chicago. The building used to be a bank, but now it had been transformed into a luxury event space. Sophie had seen photos of it before and had even considered it as a possible location for her future wedding. The marble floors, bronze railings, and high ceilings gave it a timeless beauty. It was the kind of place that made people feel important the moment they walked in. As they arrived, the large doors were open, and warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Guests were already gathering, dressed in tuxedos and evening gowns. The atmosphere was elegant and full of excitement. Sophie stepped out of the taxi and looked up at the building. It was even more impressive in person. Kate walked ahead with confidence, her heels clicking against the stone steps. Sophie followed, trying to stay calm. She wasn't used to events like this. She preferred quiet dinners and small gatherings. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had to face someone from her past. Nick stood at the top of the stairs, greeting guests with a charming smile. He wore a tailored black suit and looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. He had always known how to control a room without saying much. Sophie saw him and felt a mix of emotions. He looked the same, but something about him felt distant. She remembered the last time they spoke, the things he said, and the way he left. She had told herself that she was over it, that it didn't matter anymore. But seeing him again made her heart beat faster. Kate leaned closer and whispered something, but Sophie didn't hear it. Her focus was on Nick. He was still single, or at least that's what she believed. But she also knew that appearances could be misleading. People change, and sometimes they hide those changes well. As they walked up the stairs, Sophie took a deep breath. She didn't know what the evening would bring. She didn't know if Nick would speak to her, or if she even wanted him to. But she was here, dressed in silk, with her hair down and her heart open. And that was enough for now. Chapter 4. Surprise. Sophie and Kate climbed the marble steps slowly, trying to stay graceful despite the tight dresses and high heels. The building glowed with golden light, and the sound of soft jazz floated through the open doors. Inside, the crowd sparkled with elegance. Men in tuxedos and women in silk gowns moved through the grand hall, holding glasses of champagne and exchanging polite smiles. The atmosphere was rich and polished, like a scene from an old movie. Nick stood near the entrance, greeting guests with his usual charm. His black suit fit perfectly, and his smile was calm and confident. He looked like someone who belonged in this world, successful, admired, and in control. Sophie felt her heart beat a little faster. She hadn't seen him in person since he left for New York. He hadn't changed much, but something about him felt more distant now. Maybe it was the way he held himself, or maybe it was the woman standing beside him. She was tall, with long black curls that fell over her shoulders. Her red dress shimmered under the lights, hugging her figure like it was made just for her. Her posture was strong, and her eyes scanned the room with ease. She looked like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. Sophie noticed the diamond ring on her hand before Nick even spoke. Nick introduced her as his wife, Julia. The word hit Sophie like a cold wind. She didn't move at first. Kate, who had been smiling a moment ago, swayed slightly. Sophie reached out and guided her toward a nearby waiter carrying a tray of champagne. She took 2 glasses and handed one to Kate, who accepted it without a word. Sophie drank hers quickly, then reached for another. She didn't expect this. She had prepared herself for many things, awkward conversations, polite greetings, maybe even a quiet moment with Nick. But not this. Not a wife. Not Julia. Sophie looked around the room, trying to stay calm. She didn't want to show emotion. She didn't want anyone to see her surprise. But inside, her thoughts were racing. She remembered the way Nick used to look at her, the way he spoke about trust and connection. She remembered the proposal, the quiet moment when he asked her to be part of his life. And now, he had chosen someone else. Julia stood beside Nick with a confident smile. She looked perfect, like she belonged in every photo and every headline. Sophie caught her reflection in one of the large mirrors on the wall. Julia's smile was still there, but in the glass, it looked sharper, almost smug. Sophie didn't react. She simply stared for a moment, then turned away. She didn't know Julia. She didn't know what kind of person she was or what kind of relationship she had with Nick. But she knew one thing. Nick had made a choice. And that choice didn't include her. Sophie didn't feel angry. She felt something quieter, something deeper. It was the feeling of letting go, of accepting that some stories don't end the way you expect. She had said no to Nick once, and now he had moved on. That was life. That was reality. Kate finally spoke, her voice low and steady. She didn't say much, but Sophie understood. They were both surprised, both shaken. But they were also strong. They had faced difficult moments before, and they would face this one too. Sophie took another sip of champagne and looked around the room. The party continued, full of laughter and music. People danced, talked, and celebrated. But for her, the night had changed. It was no longer about curiosity or closure. It was about understanding. She looked at Julia one last time and made a silent promise. Not of revenge or jealousy, but of clarity. They would meet again, and when they did, Sophie would be ready. Not to compete, but to stand tall. Because sometimes, the biggest surprise is not what others do, but how you choose to respond. Chapter 5. Inner Thoughts. Sophie stood near the edge of the ballroom, holding a half-empty glass of champagne. The music played softly in the background, and the voices of guests blended into a gentle hum. She watched the crowd move around her, but her thoughts were far away. The surprise of seeing Nick with his wife had left her unsettled. She didn't enjoy drama, and she had never liked being caught off guard. But tonight had brought more than she expected. She had imagined many things before coming to the party. She thought she might feel nervous or curious. She thought she might exchange a few polite words with Nick. She even wondered if he still had feelings for her. But she had not imagined this. Seeing him introduce Julia as his wife had changed everything. It wasn't just the fact that he had moved on. It was the way he had done it, with confidence, with pride, and without hesitation. Sophie didn't feel jealous. That wasn't her nature. But she did feel something deeper. It was the quiet ache of being replaced. She had once been important to Nick. He had proposed to her. He had said she was the one who understood him. And now, he had chosen someone else. That choice made her question everything she thought she knew about their past. She looked at Julia from across the room. The woman was beautiful, graceful, and clearly comfortable in this world of luxury and attention. Sophie didn't know her, but she could see that Julia fit into Nick's life in a way she never had. Sophie had always been more private, more reserved. She didn't enjoy the spotlight. She preferred quiet moments and meaningful conversations. Maybe that wasn't what Nick wanted after all. Kate stood beside her, chatting with a group of lawyers about a recent case. She had recovered quickly from the shock. Her voice was steady, her smile bright. But Sophie knew her well enough to see the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. Kate had always been strong, but she had also been hopeful. She had believed that Nick might be a good match for Sophie, or maybe even for herself. Now, that hope was gone. Later in the evening, they found a quiet corner and sat down with fresh drinks. Kate mentioned Robert again, the farmer from Wisconsin. She had received his letter just days before the party. At first, she had laughed it off. She said she wasn't made for country life. But now, her tone was softer. She admitted that Robert had been kind, honest, and real. He didn't wear expensive suits or host grand events, but he had cared for her in a way that felt simple and true. Sophie listened and nodded. She understood. Sometimes, the people who seem less exciting are the ones who offer the most peace. Kate had pushed Robert away because she thought their worlds didn't match. But maybe she had been too quick to decide. Maybe she had missed something important. Sophie thought about her own choices. She had said no to Nick because she didn't believe their lives could fit together. She had wanted something different, something quieter, something more grounded. And now, seeing him with Julia, she realized that her decision had been right. Her feelings for Nick had been strong once, but they had faded. What hurt more was not losing him, but seeing how easily he had replaced her. The evening continued, but Sophie felt a sense of calm returning. She had faced the truth, and it had helped her see things more clearly. She didn't need Nick to feel complete. She didn't need anyone to define her worth. She had her own path, and she was ready to walk it. Kate smiled and raised her glass. Sophie did the same. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. They had both learned something tonight. About love, about choices, and about the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are. And sometimes, that strength is the most beautiful thing of all. Chapter 6. Resolution. The morning after the party was quiet. The city moved slowly under a pale sky, and the streets were still wet from a light rain. Sophie sat alone at a small cafe near her apartment. She wore a soft sweater and jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. The glamour of the night before felt far away now. The noise, the lights, the polished smiles, all of it had faded into memory. She opened her notebook and began to write. The pages were already filled with thoughts, ideas, and pieces of her life. Writing helped her think. It helped her understand what she was feeling. She didn't write about Nick directly. Instead, she wrote about choices, about timing, and about how people change. She wrote about how the past can teach you, but it shouldn't control you. Nick had made his choice. He had chosen Julia, and he had done it with confidence. Sophie respected that. She didn't feel bitter anymore. She had said no to him once, and now she saw why that decision had been right. Their lives were different. Their values were different. And maybe, deep down, she had always known that. She thought about the moment she saw Julia's reflection in the mirror. It wasn't just about beauty or style. It was about presence. Julia had walked into the room like she belonged there. Sophie had never felt that way in Nick's world. She had always felt like a visitor, someone passing through. Now, she understood that she didn't need to fit into someone else's life to feel complete. Across town, Kate sat at her desk, sipping coffee and staring at her phone. She had read Robert's letter again that morning. It was simple, honest, and full of warmth. He hadn't asked for anything. He had just shared how he felt. Kate had smiled, then typed a short message. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a plan. It was just a hello. A step forward. Kate had always been bold, but she had also been careful with her heart. She liked control. She liked knowing where things were going. But Robert had shown her something different. He had shown her that sincerity mattered more than style. That being real was more important than being perfect. Sophie finished her coffee and closed her notebook. She felt lighter. Not because everything was solved, but because she had let go of something heavy. She had let go of the idea that love had to look a certain way. She had let go of the belief that success meant being chosen by someone powerful. She had chosen herself. Later that day, Sophie and Kate met for lunch. They didn't talk much about the party. They didn't need to. They both knew what it had taught them. They had walked through a night of red dresses and mirrored smiles, and they had come out stronger. Not because they had won anything, but because they had seen the truth. They laughed, shared stories, and made plans for the weekend. Life moved on, and so did they. The past was part of them, but it didn't define them. They were women who knew their worth. Women who understood that love is not about status or power. It's about being seen, being heard, and being valued. And sometimes, rejection is not the end. It's the beginning of something better. Moral: true connection is not about status, it's about sincerity. The right people don't just stand beside you. They see you, they respect you, and they choose you for who you are. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.